Call this meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Central Yavapai Metropolitan Planning Organization Technical Advisory Committee. It is Tuesday, June 6th at 1 o'clock. Well, it's 1:10 p.m. For those online, I apologize for the delay. Just for full disclosure here, we are still waiting on another member of the TAC to join us telephonically. So as of this time, we do not have a quorum, but we're going to start the meeting, get some of the housekeeping out of the way, and hopefully Mayor John Hughes will join us. In fact, it looks like he may be on here now. John, can you hear me? John, if you can hear me, you may be muted.
*6 will unmute you if you're having trouble with your mute button.
Okay, all right. All right, with that, it's now 1:11. We're going to call.
Can you hear me?
Stay on. Would you like to call roll?
Chairman Cherry,
Present.
Vice Chair Hughes,
That's you, John. Get unmuted.
You can't hide.
All right, can you hear me? Hello.
Hey, John, can you hear us?
It's okay. It's okay.
Never mind.
That's all right.
We're good, John. Thank you.
Carry on, Allison.
Yes, I can hear you guys.
Member Mattingly,
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hey,
John, if you can hear us, we can hear you fine. You may mute unless you need to say something.
Member Marbury,
Present.
Member Ruder. Here. Member Ross is absent. Member Bondoc
here.
and the Prescott National Forest seat is vacant, but we have 5 and that's a quorum.
All right. For the record, we have.
I can hear you guys. I'm sorry that you can't hear me.
Okay.
It keeps kicking me back out to mute.
Okay. Thank you. So for the record, we have 5 members present, 4.5 if you count John. So, we're going to carry on with this meeting, though. Meeting guidelines. I'm going to read this just for the sake of the public. We would like to issue a reminder to those attending the meeting telephonically. Please keep your phone on mute until it is your turn to speak. Members of the public desiring to address the committee are subject to the following. The decision to allow a member or members of the public to speak is left to the discretion of the chair. A person may only speak if called upon by the chair. Speaking is limited to 3 minutes. The chair may limit the number of speakers. The speaker shall not be disruptive, nor shall the speaker be disrespectful towards the chair, the committee, or others. And except during the call to the public, the speaker may only address the specific agenda item then being discussed. The chair may terminate a person's speaking time for violation of any of the foregoing. Committee and audience members shall not engage in disruptive behavior during a meeting, including speaking when it is not his or her time to speak. Person may be ejected from the meeting for violation of this guideline. I appreciate that, and with that, we're going to move on to Item number 2, which is Title VI Policy and Meeting Procedures. Allison, would you please enlighten us all?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I would like to note that we have lost Vice Chair Hughes.
All right. Carry on. Thank you.
CYMPO complies with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the CYMPO Title VI plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the CYMPO website.
All right, thank you. With Vice Chair Hughes missing right now, we're anticipating he will call back in. He is on the road somewhere, but just for the record, we are down to only 4 members present. We do not have a quorum at this time, so that means we can't take action on anything until we have a 5th member present. So that doesn't mean we can't carry on. And I guess my feeling right now is I'll jump into, rather than hitting call to the public, and item 4, which is consideration and possible action for prior meeting minutes, I'd like to go to the executive director's update, which is item 5. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you, Chairman, and members of the TAC committee. Just a couple updates. A reminder, if you haven't received an email from Allison, we can send you one regarding the Rural Transportation Summit. It's an annual event held for the last 20 plus years now that focuses on the needs in Greater Arizona, which is us, and it brings attention to the state legislature and their decision making for what we are prioritizing, which is also on our agenda today. So this year it will be held in Yuma in October. And I hope last year we had a unanimous support from the TAC and the executive board. So we hope to do that again. Some of you have already registered. I think Frank said you registered. So thanks for jumping on it. But encourage you all to get signed up for that, please. The other announcement I have is regarding the calendar. We do have TAC meetings scheduled every month, but if you remember when I proposed the calendar to you for this year, our effort was to, in the end, have about 6 to 7 meetings for the entire year that would focus on the business needed at hand. So Allison's about to bring up a tentative calendar that, again, is tentative, so everything changes. At this time, with this conclusion of this meeting today, tentatively, we will not have any business for you in the months of July, August, and September, meaning that we would tentatively return for a TAC meeting October and November, and then tentatively and traditionally, we have not had meetings in December. With that said, the upcoming October, November meetings are also being rescheduled due to other conflicts. So I know this month and last month have not fallen on traditional dates, I believe due to the chairman's schedule, but he appreciates everyone adjusting the schedule. And then in November, we have a conflict with the Roads and Streets Conference. And October, there's another conflict I don't remember. But with that said, this is the remaining tax schedule for the rest of the year. There may be invitations to specific projects such as the State Route 69 Master Corridor Plan or the ACT UP Bicycle Pedestrian Plan. But I just wanted to give you this a heads up. And then we will also be sending a doodle poll out at some point, because the traditional Thursday, whatever the first Thursday of the month, is a potential conflict for Heather, as Prescott Valley tends to have their study session at 3 p.m. And if we were to keep this schedule, it would interfere with her availability for the TAC and the town study session. So this is just a heads up as to where we're at. With that said, Mr. Chair, happy to take questions or comments.
All right, thank you, Vinny. I appreciate that. It's nice to see a little bit of planning going ahead here. October's a long way off, and maybe we can have some discussions about that as we move a little closer to it as to when will work best for everyone. I can already envision potential conflicts that week of 10/10 as well, but we'll figure it out, I'm sure, and we can find something. So let's go ahead and keep that in mind, and we'll find something that will work and maybe move something around that will be more conducive to working with Prescott Valley's schedule as well. So
Sounds good.
any questions for Vinny? For the record, we still do not have John Hughes on here. So I'm going to move on to item 6, which is, and for those, I do have a, just for the record, I do have a call to the public sheet here. If we happen to get Mr. Hughes back, I will immediately try to jump back to call to the public. I realize that's not action, but I do feel it's imperative from a open meeting law standpoint that we have a quorum present for any call to the public. So that is why I skipped that as well. So on to number 6, pending project updates. Lindsay, you have some updates for us on the State Route 69 urbanized corridor master plan.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the TAC, since we just had the Sundog Connector stakeholder meeting, not an update there. As you know, AECom will now continue in their engineering work based on that feedback we got. So I'd like to focus today on SR 69. There's been quite a lot of progress done in that project, and for that reason, we'll start a bi-weekly meeting with the project manager at Kilson and Associates. So that person just happens to be on vacation in India, and he made a vague threat that he would stay up till 1 to try to jump on this call. And I said, you're crazy, enjoy your vacation. So we'll see if he does that. But I do have an update for us. So the team is currently working on the existing conditions analysis. They had already done all the data collection and now are working on the analysis of that data. They have obtained and are processing the replica data. Replica is the agency who's doing our traffic modeling for us. And that includes daily traffic counts, turn movement counts, and origin destination data for the entire CYMPO region. And they're coordinating with United Civil to obtain some additional turn movement counts for certain intersections. And what that does is help validate the data that they get from Replica. It's a best practice that helps make sure that we've got the best quality data that we can get. So they perform these validations at randomly selected intersections to provide that backup. So they're also updating the traffic model, the traffic demand model for the entire CYMPO region based on that data. And to that end, we had recently attended a work session that CYMPO hosted with a lot of the area planners and community development, economic development staff members. We got a lot of great information, and we're still working with those same people to continue to get information. And what that information is gathering upcoming commercial, residential, economic development projects that are coming into our region. As we know, basically anything that's built in our region will impact SR 69. So a lot of the questions we get is, how far from SR 69 do you want to know about what development we're doing? And the answer is all of it, because of how critical SR 69 is to our region. So some of the feedback that I've gotten from Vamshi is that we are getting great data. Even better if we can get more detailed on things like mileposts. Those are the bits of details that are left out often that we have to go clean up after the fact. They're also compiling transit routes and facilities, the existence of or the gaps of those, and compiling walking and biking facility data along the corridor. And then the last thing that they're working on right now that I have an update for is the safety analysis, and they are building off of the safety analysis that Mike Blankenship and his team are doing right now at the helm of Bryn Stotler as the project manager, to be able to do a deep dive of specific intersections and corridor segments as needed. So Mr. Chair, that is the SR 69 update. Vamshi is due back in about 2 weeks. And after that, we're excited to move forward with obtaining a drone vendor who also is a 360-degree camera operator. He's here local, and he's provided some work for us before, but that'll help to get some time lapse of the traffic, as well as overlay some maps of, if we're able to widen on one side or the other, they'll be able to overlay that data, give us a really good look from about 400 feet above. Welcome, any questions?
Thank you, Lindsay. Any questions for Lindsay? Hearing none, we will move on.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. If I could.
Yes, sir.
Tony Hamer with candidate for Prescott City Council. Can you give us an idea of some dates in the future in terms of what will become available? And
Yes, thank you for asking. We kicked off this project in fall of 2022. So we're, almost halfway through. We sort of timed it so that our executive board can view the results of that at the same time, around the same time as Sundog Connector, so that they could see the full picture. Because part of what SR 69's master plan will give is a no build or a scenario if Sundog comes, and a scenario if Sundog does not, and that's critical to it. So you can expect towards the fall of this year to see the final report. We of course update this body if we do expect delays so that you can adjust accordingly. Thanks for asking.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 7, update of State Route 8989A on-ramps project. Vinny, you want to kick this off, and perhaps we have Karen here?
I do, and I just realized I have an old agenda. It wasn't on my agenda.
It got amended, by the way.
It did, and yes, I don't have that. Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So this item is State Route 89A on-ramps project. So we have the project manager, Karen Hobbs, and I'll turn this over to her in a minute. Thanks, Lindsay. What's noteworthy here, background-wise, remember 2 years ago, CYMPO made this intersection a priority with one-time funding through the state legislature. Very grateful to the legislature at the time, led by Senator Karen Fan, Representative Quan Nguyen, and Representative Burgess at the time. CYMPO had done an alternative selection report for this intersection. The ultimate fix for this intersection, eastbound on-ramp going towards Prescott Valley, was a $5.5 million solution, or adding a second lane onto 89A at that intersection. Long story short, what was awarded through the state legislature was 3 million of the 5.5 million. It might have been an expensive clerical error, but they had 2 line items. One said 3 million, one said 2.5. The 2.5 disappeared, and we ended up with 3 million for a $5.5 million project. With that said, CYMPO has been in discussions with ADOT for this past year to go ahead and move forward, and to be in a situation from a design standpoint that if the $2.5 million was to be identified for this project, that the project, with or without it, would be able to move forward. So that is what has been happening, to use the $3 million to start with the design of the project. Which is where Karen's going to speak to you about the technical parts of that. The other incredibly noteworthy part, recently the state legislature, in an effort to clean up the language related to this project, 2 years ago, the language should have stated 3 million for design and construction. However, what was passed in the bill was 3 million for design. So no construction can be done because of the way that the law reads. So there's been an effort to resolve this issue, and the effort to resolve it is to remove $2.4 million from the design, which I'm okay with. The problem that this took place 2 to 3 weeks ago, and the money has not been returned to the project for construction. So that's the alarming part, is $2.4 million needs to be put back into the project in order for construction to take place right after design. So with all that said, Karen, can you speak to the project as it stands if we were to have the $3 million and what that means?
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can, Karen. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm going to share my screen to start with Google. So I'm hoping everybody can see that momentarily. Can everyone see it?
Yes, we can.
All right. So the line work that you see here, this is 89A, or 89, excuse me, and 89A traffic interchange. And this is the crossroad for Larry Caldwell, as well as the interchange there. And then on the far right of your screen is going to be Granite Creek. The limits of the project in the blue line work is the line work that was completed as part of the alternative selection report completed in June of 2022. So you can see the full limits of the project, basically from the bridges on 89A TI to the bridges at Granite Creek. This is the $5.5 million limits of the project. It does include modifications to the on-ramp. That's the east, I'm going to use cardinal directions here, the eastbound on-ramp from 89 to 89A for 2 lanes, a third through lane on 89A, and then the length of merging all the way to Granite Creek bridges. Included in this some minor modifications to the what everybody calls the frontage road from the on-ramp to the Larry Caldwell exit ramp and access the TI there. Typically, drivers are not going, they need to exit 89A or Pioneer Parkway here, traverse down the off-ramp, cross 89, and then get on to the frontage road to access Larry Caldwell. Unfortunately, a lot of drivers are not seeing this, and they're causing an issue with the weave coming across the 2 gore areas from the on-ramp from 89A to access Larry Caldwell. So that is one of the goals for the project, is to eliminate that. The second goal is to align the traffic better from 89 in either direction, accessing the on-ramp and aligning them into the proper lane to access Larry Caldwell. So there's no weave problems coming across the on-ramp itself. So moving forward, because of the price tag associated with the development of the preferred alternative in the ASR, as part of ADOT's project, and Angie Galletti is also here with me. She is the ADOT PM. So if you have any questions for her as well, we can both come off mute after I present this. Part of that is looking at the preferred alternative and finding finding locations and elements that we can defer to a later date and or eliminate altogether from the project, as they are, they would be nice to have, but is it necessary for functionality or improving the level of service this on-ramp provides the community and the drivers? So looking from those lenses, we looked at an alternative. So I'm going to shut off the ASR alternative and I'm going to turn on a second alternative. First thing that pops out to you is this is the orange and red. The limits are getting pulled back from Granite Creek, as well as from 89A on ramps and the TI here. And we've eliminated the third lane on 89A, and we're going to recommend deferring that third lane to a future time and a future project. We know that CYMPO is is coordinating with ADOT to study 89A and the expansion of 89A with an additional lane in each direction of travel from 89 to Glassford Hill Road. So we have determined in the analysis that if we modify the on-ramp on 89 to 89A to 2 lanes, we don't see a lot of benefits for adding that third lane at this point in time. The operations still say well above critical mass or a breakdown in the year 2045, even without that third lane. So we can defer that third lane to a later date and just focus on improving the on-ramp. Additionally, we do have the 2-lane on-ramp that runs onto 89A, and we have pulled back the weave lengths to minimum. In the ASR, the consultant that developed that document had the weave lengths out at 1,500 feet apiece. We have to drop 2 lanes coming in. We pulled those back to ADOT minimum recommendations to 700 feet to see how the traffic will react. Preliminary analysis provides us that we achieve a level of service C or B, depending AM, PM peak, and therefore it is fully within the operational parameters of an on-ramp of this type. so we can minimize that. All widening again would happen on the outside, and therefore the impacts to traffic during construction will be minimized. Instead of having construction on both sides in the median and then on the outside, we also reduce it just to the outside, which then reduces the overall construction cost of the project. Additionally, because we aren't adding that third through lane in here, we eliminate any drainage concerns or any drainage modifications that we would have for 89A. So we're getting that price tag down a little bit. Additionally, where there's some lower cost work that we can do to be included to get that driver expectancy for the 2-lane on-ramp and the access to Larry Caldwell well in advance of having to actually make that decision at the gore of where my hand is shown. We have recommended, we will be recommending to ADOT to revise the signing as you approach an eastbound Pioneer Parkway. There's some signage here that is a little ambiguous for drivers. We're looking at modifying that signage to be very specific for access to Larry Caldwell and change that out. Secondly, on the off ramp of 89A here, we're going to revise, and I'm going to zoom in so hopefully nobody gets too dizzy. You can see here that we have marking on the pavement that it's 2 through lanes going through to the on-ramp, the inside left, the outside is right. The volumes of traffic right now actually predicate a left only going through here. It's a heavier movement and a through and right. So we're going to do some restriping in here to allow the heavier movement exclusive left, not merge with a through traffic, and then restrict the through traffic and right traffic into the outside lane. What this does is it lines up any driver that exits this ramp that wants to access Larry Caldwell to go through the light in the right turn lane and stay in the right turn lane to access the said frontage road and access Larry Caldwell without any weave. And then the last thing I wanted to discuss is the southbound 89 movement. There's a sign bridge here that does not adequately have some signage for Larry Caldwell. Again, we're going to look at modifying that overhead sign, the large green signs that you see and restrict Larry Caldwell access to the outside or the right left turn lane to go through the interchange and make its turn. Therefore, again, we're lining up our drivers for the southbound direction, making a left, and they're going to end up in that outside lane on the on-ramp, and then they can slide and slip off onto the frontage road. This will align traffic and again, eliminate a weave that might be occurring when you have dual left turns coming around the corner and accessing the on-ramp to 89A. We are in the process of finalizing the analysis for traffic, as well as developing some preliminary cost estimates with today's construction costs associated with the project. So unfortunately, I don't have any data for you all today on that. With that, that pretty much puts us up to date with the development of the on-ramp project.
All right. Thank you very much,
You're very welcome.
Karen. Angela, do you want to add anything on that?
Nope, I don't have anything else to add. I'm here for any ADOT questions if any arise.
All right. Any questions from the Technical Advisory Committee members? Any questions from CYMPO?
I guess just more of a comment, Dan and TAC. This has been, I want to applaud the efforts of ADOT and the consultant, especially because with the money moving as this project's moving forward has been a big conversation piece. So I guess to help us out as a region, it's important to be reminded that we were successful in getting $480,000 for a design concept report with Senator Mark Kelly's effort. So a federal apportionment that DCR will cover from on 89A from the intersection of 89 to Glassford Hill Road. So that's been a part of this project because to Karen's point, what isn't necessarily able to be covered as part of this project, our intent will be it'll be covered as part of the DCR in the future improvements in this corridor. So that'd be just more of a comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vinny. And I believe we're correct that things are up in the air on money right now, but hopefully we get this design done and perhaps we'll have something come back in to help fund construction, correct?
Yeah, we were sweating the 2.5 million that was lacking before, but now I'm sweating additional 2.4 million. So that's more pressing, and we are working with ADOT executive leadership, and it may need to come back to the state legislature to help with this, because again, they did resolve an error, but
They created a new one.
Yes, they did. Thank you.
Mhm. All right, any further discussion or questions? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it, Karen, and good luck moving things forward. That's great. So,
Thank you.
all right. Bryn, you ready? Update on regional strategic transportation safety plan. Take it away. Looks like we got Mr. Blankenship joining us as well as part of this. So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC, Bryn Stotler, I'm a CYMPO planner. As you are aware from previously having approved the scope of work and RFP for this safety plan, the safety plan collaboration through Mike Blankenship's team at Green Light Traffic Engineering was kicked off in late 2022. We're around the midpoint of the planning process now. Mike and his team at Greenlight have been compiling and synthesizing crash data from the period 2017 to 2021. That is the active period for this safety plan update. At this time, Mike is going to highlight some preliminary data findings, and we invite you to raise a hand, jump in with the approval of the chair to ask a question as data is presented. So Mike is going to share his screen, which he's doing now, and we invite you, Mike, to go ahead and download your safety data to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Bryn. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And you can see the title slide there.
Yes.
Okay. And feel free to jump in as we go through. We've got about 10 or 12 slides here, I think. Jump in with questions, comments, or we can come back to them at the end. So just wanted to highlight again, we presented the main focus area summary a few months back, but since then we've highlighted distracted driving, added distracted driving at the bottom. And basically what this table is showing is how the region stacks up against the state in terms of all crashes, serious injury crashes, and fatal crashes in these various behaviors and locations down the first column there. So the ones that are highlighted in dark blue are where either the region has a very high percentage of those crash severities or is above what we're seeing statewide. So we've highlighted them, for example, intersection crashes. Over half of the crashes in the CYMPO region, almost 57%, are occurring at intersections. About 57% of the serious injury crashes in the region occur at intersections. And 41% of the fatal crashes in the region are occurring at intersections, compared statewide to about 29% of fatals occur at intersections. So I won't go through all of these, but the ones that we've highlighted, lane departure, these are generally run off the road crashes, but they would also include a vehicle crossing a center line, for example, becoming involved in a head-on crash. So any type of crash that involves leaving a lane. Again, high numbers, especially on the fatals. This one really jumps out. 70% of the fatal crashes in the region involve either running off the road or leaving the lane. Pedestrian crashes, in terms of total crashes, they're a fairly small amount, right around 1% of all crashes in the region are pedestrian, but 14% of the fatal crashes are pedestrian. Bike crashes, a similar statistics, a little less than 1% of all crashes involve bicyclists, but almost 5.5% of the fatal crashes involve bicyclists. Speeding and aggressive driving. Now this includes both exceeding the lawful speed limit, but more often than not, it's coded as speed too fast for conditions, which doesn't necessarily mean exceeding the speed limit. It just means the driver was going too fast given the conditions, whether it's a curve, rainy weather, whatever it might be. Again, fairly high numbers. About a third of all crashes in the region involve speeding and aggressive driving. About a third of the serious injury crashes, and then about 27% of the fatal crashes involve the speeding. Older drivers stand out also, older drivers being involved in crashes. So again, a little over a third of all crashes involve older drivers being defined as 65 and older. Almost 35% of the serious injuries involve older drivers. And compared to the state, it's double. Statewide, we're seeing about 17, 18% of crashes and serious injury crashes involve older drivers. And again, carries through to the fatal crashes. 34% of fatal crashes involve older drivers compared to 19% statewide involving older drivers. And that's not to say that the older drivers in the CYMPO region are worse drivers than statewide. Part of that is probably due to the demographics, and there may be a larger percentage of older drivers in the region as compared to statewide. And then the last one there, distracted driving. This is a difficult behavior to capture on the police crash report form. Typically, the driver almost has to admit to talking on their phone or yelling at the kids or doing something that was distracting them from the driving task. But you can see the numbers here in the region are higher again than statewide. About 12% of all crashes in the region involve distracted driving. About 7% of the fatal crashes in the region involve distracted driving. So based on that analysis, and we looked back at the previous regional safety plan, which was developed in 2018, and you can see the emphasis areas that were in that earlier plan, and there were several of them here, 9 of them. We've narrowed those down a little bit to focus on those top 7 that I just highlighted in the previous slide. That's not to say that younger drivers shouldn't be given importance, or nighttime crashes, but these were the 7 that kind of jump out in terms of crashes, and especially fatal crashes. And we're recommending that the region consider having these 7 as the priority emphasis areas. Now, the next several slides, we're going to get into the network screening results, and this is where we looked region-wide at all the crashes over the last 5 years, from 2017 through 2021, all of the reported crashes that make it into ADOT's crash database. And the way we are ranking the intersections is based on a method that's used nationally called the equivalent property damage only method. And I'm going to try not to get into the weeds too much here describing this, but I want you to understand where the scoring system comes from in ranking these intersections in the region. So it basically gives weight to each of the crashes that have occurred in the region based on the severity level of the crash. And at the bottom here, there's 5 severity levels ranging from the worst, a fatal crash, to the least severe, which would be property damage only. There's damage to the vehicle, but no occupants were injured in the crash. And the weight that is given is based on ADOT's crash costs. So in Arizona, a fatal crash is worth $9.5 million. And basically that takes into account cost to society, lost wages. There's a whole host of factors that go into ADOT developing these numbers. But if a fatal crash can be eliminated, it's basically worth a benefit of $9.5 million compared to a property damage only crash, which has a crash cost of 10, almost 11,000. So each of these crashes are weighted by the ratio to the property damage only cost. So a PDO, property damage only cost, is going to be given a weight of 1. A fatal crash is going to be given a weight of 9.5 million divided by that 11,000, which is 891. In other words, a fatal crash is worth 891 property damage only crashes. And then we took those weights and divided them by the 5 years of data that we have. So when we go through the next few slides, you'll see scores, severity scores, just to let you know where that intersection would rank in terms of how severe the crashes are. If an intersection had a fatal crash over that 5-year period, it would have, and no other crashes, it would have a score of 178.2. which is basically the fatal crash weight divided by 5 years.
Mike, I got a question.
Yes, Dan.
Is this the same method that's used during HSIP applications?
Yes. Okay. So that's almost a trick question, but these are the same cost values that are used in the HSIP. Highway Safety Improvement Program funding that ADOT doles out federal safety funds based on fatal and serious injury crashes. So when putting an HSIP application together, these bottom 3 types of crashes or crash severities would not be included. So it would only look at the serious injury and the fatal crashes in an HSIP. But you're right, these would be the values used in that in determining the benefit cost ratio.
Thank you.
Yep. So the first slide where we've listed the top 20 intersections in the region based on that scoring system. And I'd really like to get some feedback as we go through these, and the next few slides will take each of the local agencies within the region and look at their top 20. But this is region-wide, top 20. And obviously, because fatal crashes count for so much, all of these had at least 1 fatal crash. 2 of the intersections had 2 fatal crashes. So the one at the top of the list, well, I guess the top 2, they're within 10 points of each other. Crash severity score of 370 and 360. The Frontage Road and Meadowlark Drive in Prescott Valley. Number 2, the new roundabout there at the Sundog Connector and Prescott Lakes Parkway is number 2. Again, based on the severity of the crashes. So when you look over here at the 6th, 7th column over total crashes, you'll see that using this equivalent property damage only ranking doesn't really pull out the intersections that have the highest number of crashes, although there are several in here that have quite a few crashes, but it's really pulling out those intersections that have serious injury and fatal crashes. And that really ties into not only ADOT's HSIP process, but also the Federal Highway Administration focus on Vision Zero and getting to 0 fatal and 0 serious injury crashes. That the thinking being there's always going to be minor crashes at locations, but if we can address locations that have these most severe type of crashes, then we're getting more bang for our buck. So a few things to keep in mind, and we don't have to hash through them during this, but hopefully Bryn will be sending this presentation out to the TAC members. We'd like for you to make sure that, A, do these intersections make sense? Does it make sense that these are the top 20? And if not, why? Well, what are we missing here? And also take a look at the street names for the intersections, because in pulling the data from the various sources, ADOT's database, GIS maps, some of these names may be incorrect, or they may have a name that isn't typically used in the region, and we want to make sure that we've got the right street names for these intersections. And as you can see here on the crash severity score, remember I said a score of 178 would be equivalent to having 1 fatal crash every 5 years, or having those, 178 property damage only crashes. So let's go through the individual local agencies and maybe it'll make a little more sense here. So we start with the county, and what we've showed here is we're doing a safety plan for CYMPO, NACOG, and the Flagstaff Planning Agency Metro Plan. So we've included all of the Yavapai County in this scoring, but we've highlighted in dark over here the CYMPO, the intersections that fall within the CYMPO region, and really like to get some feedback on what's best for the county in terms of, hey, do you just want, we can pull a top 20 just in the NACOG region, a top 20 in the CYMPO region, but we wanted to show you how the CYMPO intersections stack up with the NACOG intersections in terms of being within a county. Another thing to keep in mind, these are the locations, or these are all, for Yavapai County, these 20 intersections are intersections that are in unincorporated Yavapai County. It doesn't mean that it's controlled or maintained or operated by the county, because a lot of these are ADOT, at least one of the roads being an ADOT intersecting road. So we're not showing by ADOT facility here, but crashes that occur within unincorporated Yavapai County. And at the top of the list there, Dan, would be 260 in Western. Had 2 fatals and 2 serious injury crashes, and then a host of other less severe. So 32 total crashes over the 5-year period for a score of 405.
Mike, this is Lindsay Post, Mr. Chair. May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So Vinny, that one that says Legend Hills and SR 89A, is that where we're thinking of a road safety assessment?
Yes.
That's good data.
Yeah, so this one down here, which, whoops, looks like it's about number, I don't know, 12, 13. Yes, so that is towards the northeast boundary of CYMPO, heading up towards Jerome, I guess it is, up the mountain. So it's definitely in the top 20, and it would actually be 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5 for within the CYMPO region in terms of unincorporated county locations.
And certainly some of these are being addressed with ongoing HSIP projects too.
That's an excellent point, Dan. So I know the fourth one from the bottom, this one just got funded this last round of HSIP. I think a northbound left turn lane will be going in at Stasinski and Williamson Valley Road.
Yeah. Little Ranch is the other one.
Little Ranch in 89?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's good information to know, because when we're putting the safety plan together towards the end of it, yeah, we want to highlight, here's the top 20 based on crash data. Here's what the county or ADOT or whoever is already doing with, 3 or 4 of these. So it kind of highlights some of the successes and what's being done. And then eventually what we're going to be doing towards the back end of this safety plan is taking the network screening results from the public surveys, and developing potential projects for the region and the local agencies to go after. And obviously those that already have projects would drop off that list.
And the other one that comes to mind, Mike, is that Spring and SR 69, that of course has had a new light put in within the last 5 years. And so it may matter how that distribution of those crashes were before or after the signal as well, because I do think there were times prior to the signal people had to make some quick decisions and maybe ill-advised decisions to pull out onto oncoming traffic, which now they don't have to anymore. So you might take a look at that. I realize that's outside of CYMPO at this time, but as you build this going forward, there's certainly some cases that have had mitigative efforts done or our ongoing mitigation to make things better. So
yeah, and that's definitely excellent feedback that we're hoping to get. So we will take a closer look to see where those 2 fatals they might have occurred in that first year of the 5-year period before the signal went in. So yeah,
I think the other thing I noticed, I think that Fort Rock and Old 66 is that's another one we have going on with HSIP that's just about to start up design on. We got a HSIP for turn lane at that Fort Rock and 66 as well.
Oh, okay, good. Wow. So that's at least 4 of these 20
Yeah.
have projects or had a recent project.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's a sad state of affairs, but when we have fatalities, it usually sets us up for successful HSIP applications. And many of these are, just they're not always even necessarily problems of the road. Many times there's impairment or whatnot. I think there was concern about, driver condition and whatnot on that Fort Rock and 66, but it allowed us to seek out some funding on it to put some turn lanes in and make it better. So
Yeah. That is one of the, I think the disadvantages of the current process. And it's not just ADOT, this is nationally focusing on the fatals when they're a fairly rare event. You don't want to belittle any of the fatal crashes, but sometimes, like you said, it's not really a safety issue from the road standpoint. It's more of a driver or human factors issue that caused the fatal.
all right, thanks. You may keep moving.
Okay, Prescott, and again, the top 20 here within the Prescott city limits. Again, some of these intersections may be ADOT intersections, but these are the top 20 that fall within the city boundaries. Actually, here now we're starting about the lower half of these, the bottom 10 or 11. There were no fatal crashes, but you can see there were anywhere from 1 to 3 serious injury crashes until you get down to number 20. And it did not have, Gurley and Sheldon didn't have a fatal or serious, but it had a fair amount of the other less severe type crashes. So it's got a lower score, 39, but overall within the city, it would rank number 20 based on this scoring system. So I guess if Vinny and I talked the other day about what would be kind of not a cutoff, but what would you consider high priority? I think anything that's at that 178 and above, remember 178 would be equivalent to 1 fatal every 5 years or a whole bunch of non-fatal crashes. That's probably the top priority I would give is anything that's at, say, a 178 and above, which would mean about 10 intersections here within Prescott would jump to that priority level.
Excuse me, Dan and Mike. Good time for a HSIP commercial plug. So later this year, CYMPO will come back to you to hire a consultant to do what we did a few years ago. HSIP funds are available through ADOT every 2 years. So between Dan and Mike, they've highlighted, I don't know, 5 or 6 HSIP projects. So as we get into your jurisdictions, be mindful of that. Lindsay will be coming back to you later this year and soliciting projects. And I would assume this would be a menu that we would be able to choose from. Again, just looking at this list, Fair Street and Gale Gardner, I think is what, number 9, 10 on the list. CYMPO was successful in getting an HSIP award for $1 million for that traffic signal at that intersection. Again, 100% federal funds, no match to it. So as you look at these individual lists, be thinking of HSIP applications that we'll be asking for later on. Thank you.
Mike, you're a little more in tune with things, but there's always been some talk about maybe trying to convert some HSIP eligibility to more predictive modeling rather than just based on actual crashes. Have you heard any movement in that regard as to whether they would consider it, or are we likely to still be seeing the same thing going forward, which is, based on crash history rather than predictive crashes?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, Dan, because right now it's more of a reactive process as opposed to if you use predictive, you could potentially get a project before that tragic fatal crash occurs based on characteristics of the location. The last word I heard was back in April at the Arizona ITE conference, and yes, ADOT is still hoping to move towards more of a predictive analysis as opposed to this historical or reactive process, but it doesn't sound like they're that close to doing it. Now, having said that, the HSIP application cycle may still be a year out, and maybe at that point they will be closer. I did notice the other day on the ADOT, as we pull this crash data out of ADOT's ACES database, crash database, they do have a new filter in there that says network screening. And I need to follow up with ADOT on that to see if they are actually using predictive or basically doing what we're doing here. And my guess is they're doing what we're doing here, which is the reactive, but eventually they are going to get to that predictive analysis. And I think that will help out, especially some of the smaller agencies that may not have had the fatal crashes that would justify HSIP funds, but they have the type of location that someday will have a fatal crash just because of the characteristics of the intersection.
Well, you can see with the annual crash frequency at some of these intersections that, it's bound to happen. It's just, like I'm looking at the highest annual crash frequency, which is Deep Well Ranch at 89, and luckily we got a roundabout there, so we're dealing with fairly slow traffic patterns in there, which is good, and probably will keep that fatal crash number either at 0 or a low number going into the future. But other ones on this list that have high frequencies are not able to experience that active transportation speed reduction, and so it seems like they're more of a ticking time bomb. So
exactly, yeah. Sometimes the difference between property damage only and a fatal crash is the fact that everybody in the vehicle was wearing a seatbelt and a passenger wasn't ejected. So yeah, the high frequency intersections, to me, well, we won't get into it, but I think high frequency intersections should be eligible for safety funds also, even if they haven't had a fatal crash.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Carry on.
Yep. Yeah, because on this one here, really right now, if the only ones that would probably qualify with a high enough benefit cost ratio for HSIP funds would be these from Alto and Gurley up. You almost have to have at least a fatal crash to score high enough in the HSIP ranking to get those federal safety funds.
Yeah.
Prescott Valley. Kind of similar to Prescott. It looks like about half of the top 20 score at that higher 178 value and up.
Mike, can I butt in just a moment? We have a question.
Yeah.
A member of the public that's present, if you will spare us a moment here.
Sure.
Thank you. I believe this is data for 2017 through 21. Have you done any analysis as to whether any of these intersections are getting worse over time?
Mike, did you hear that question?
I did. I think I understood. Basically, looking at the 5 years, are any of these getting worse?
Or even looking
over time.
Last 5-year block.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we've only pulled these 5 years of data. We've actually pulled some of the newer data, 2022 data, but it's the full year is not available in the ADOT database. But we pulled that because that could feed into an HSIP application this next round. We have not compared it to the previous 5 years. One thing that we can fairly quickly and easily do is compare these top locations to the top locations that were identified in that 2018 plan, which would basically be comparing it to the previous 5 years, and see if, my guess is a number of these are going to show up in both of those safety plans.
Thank you.
Because typically with the crashes, they're mainly related to traffic volumes. There's other characteristics that go into where a crash might occur, but typically the higher volume locations are going to have the higher frequency of crashes, and that's usually what we see in these rankings.
Of course. All right, you were talking about Prescott Valley before I cut in. I apologize.
Nope, that's quite all right. So we've got only one intersection that had two fatal crashes, but again, a handful, about 8 or 9 of them had at least a single fatal, and then some of those had a couple of serious injury crashes. Again, a lot of these occur at intersections with ADOT facilities. In this case, State Route 69. Up in Frank's neck of the woods, Chino Valley, again, a lot of these are going to be state facility intersections. 3 of the intersections had a fatal crash, and then looks like anywhere from 0 to 3 serious injury crashes on the other 17 intersections there. Frank, when you get a chance, if you could, again, make sure that these make sense in terms of, yeah, that sounds about right. Or, hey, where's this intersection that we know is a problem? It's nowhere on your list here. Want to make sure that either nothing was left out in terms of the crash data, or something didn't go wrong in terms of the scoring system.
Yeah, real quick on that, Mike, the top one, Perkinsville and 1 East.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually slated to convert that from a 2-way stop to a 4-way stop due to some development in the area. So,
oh, okay,
that may change how that intersection functions. So,
right.
Yeah, I'll pull and see what that fatal was on it, if it was related to.
Yeah, and we can easily pull that out. Yeah, especially if it was an angle or coming off of the side street there and getting struck by the street that will soon, or the direction that will soon have a stop control that would take care of that type of crash.
Yeah, a lot of truck traffic on that road too.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and I guess in terms of total crashes, the one that's jumping out is fourth in the ranking there. Road 2 North and 89, 73 total crashes, so averaging almost 15 crashes a year at that intersection.
Yeah, that's one I was looking at, wondering why it wasn't ranked as high, but that's just because we've gotten lucky.
Yeah, exactly. You've had one serious injury, but no fatals yet. So yeah, probably a matter of inches of that serious one becoming a fatal.
Yeah, that's probably the highest volume intersection in town. So.
Yeah. Okay. I'm guessing John probably didn't jump back on, but we've got Dewey Humboldt here. Really the one, and I know he brought this up last year when we were looking at potential HSIP locations, the intersection of 69 and Kloss there in town. And obviously it is the highest ranked by far, 193 on the crash score, and the next highest one only has a score of 20. And I did take a closer look at this last year and this year. It does not meet, or it didn't meet traffic signal warrants. That would probably be the next type of operational improvement. There would be a signal at this intersection, but it's not going to meet either from a traffic volume or from a crash. There's a crash warrant. If you've had 5 or more angle crashes over a 1-year period, it could qualify for a signal, and it doesn't meet that one either, unfortunately, because I know that has been a concern that John's brought up on numerous occasions. I think these next two, instead of clicking on the link, I'm going to pull those up in a second. I'm going to go to the next steps, and then if we still have time, Vinny and Dan, I'll defer to you. But I'd like to pull those interactive crash maps up real quick, just to let the group see what we've got, because I think those are going to be possibly more valuable to you than these tables. Anyway, in terms of next steps. So what we just showed you were the top intersections where we're plowing through the segments and the corridors, the crashes that are away from intersections, and we'll be coming up with top lists of the segments based on that same scoring criteria. And ideally, we would then combine the intersections and segments and say, okay, this is really a hotspot corridor. You've got 2 top 20 intersections and 3 segments in the top 20, you know, on whatever it is, State Route 69 from Costco, you know, 3 miles east. And really start looking at potential projects, not only for highway HSIP funding, but also the bigger pot that's available nationally now, the Safe Streets and Roads for All funding. There's $1 billion a year available nationally for projects that come out of these safety plans. So I think the region will be set up pretty nicely to go after some funding. We will summarize. We've completed the public survey process, used an online mapping tool to encourage the public to highlight locations where they feel unsafe. Also a written survey. So we'll be pulling all that together and seeing how that lines up with what the crash data is telling us. Those 7 emphasis areas that I highlighted at the beginning, we're going to be developing specific strategies, engineering strategies, enforcement, education strategies for each of those emphasis areas. And then, like I just mentioned, ultimately coming up with a list of projects for the region to consider in terms of going after some funding. So again, I defer to you guys if you have time and want me to pull up those 2 interactive maps, or we can save that for another time, but I've got them ready if you want to see them.
Any preferences from members of the TAC? Frank, would you like to see them? Heather, would you like to see them?
I'd love to get a copy of the PowerPoint though.
I don't know if you heard that, Mike, but we'd like to see a copy of the PowerPoint distributed. I assume you can get that over to CYMPO staff and they can share it with members of the TAC. I guess if you want to show us the interactive maps quickly, just so we got an idea of what it is you're trying to represent. I don't object to that. You know, we're a little bit of a lame duck here right now, not having a quorum, so I don't mind spending a little bit of time on it. So
Shocked if you asked an engineer if they wanted to see a map.
Okay, can you see the map?
not yet.
Oh, maybe I need to stop share and share again.
John.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Unless he's calling from a different number.
That could be.
Now can you see the map?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So this highlights based on that crash severity score we talked about, and all these little blue dots are any intersection that scored above 116. So it actually probably includes the top 20 and then a few. And actually it goes outside of the CYMPO into the NACOG, but we'll just focus on the CYMPO boundary here. If you click on each of these, it'll pull up the additional scores, intersections that have some of the lower scores. I was just going to focus on the higher scores. And it also has the segment scores. So right now I've highlighted the highest scoring ones and, you know, kind of the usual suspects there, 89, 89A, 69. If you click on the next highest one, obviously more segments will be pulled in there. So highlighting all of the scores, you're basically going to see, I think, what you would typically expect to see. The darker the segment, the higher the crash severity score is. And I think it was Bryn that had mentioned, or maybe Lindsay, that one intersection at Legend Hills. So that's coming up in the top 20, that intersection, and also that stretch of 89A is coming up as a higher severity. So that's that one. We probably don't need to get into the other one, but the other one gives you more of a graphical donut graph. Actually, let me. Pull it up here real quick.
Engineers like donuts too.
So it's like
We do have John.
it's good to know. He's just an attendee at this point, though. Don't don't rock the boat yet. We'll get
Wait, bounce them all.
get to action items here and we'll see if we can get them on for,
Okay, did it come up?
not yet, but give it a second here. Might be a little slow, Mike. It's like you're not sharing your screen anymore. I don't know if that's your intent.
As Mike's pulling that up, again, these tools are available to all of your agencies through
We got it,
the
Mike.
planning process and safety plan. So we will send out the PowerPoint, Heather, as Heather requested, to all of you, but again, know that these tools are being developed for your respective municipalities.
Yeah, so this one, that previous one showed intersections and segments based on that score that we discussed. This actually shows summaries of the total number of crashes and their severity levels by location. So the larger the donut, the higher the number of crashes. And again, kind of makes sense, Prescott Valley. We've got some up in Chino Valley on 89 there. And as you zoom in, we'll zoom in on Frank's neck of the woods here. As you zoom in, those donuts distribute out. So at Road 2N and 89, if you click on the donut there, it'll tell you, okay, 28 no injury crashes, 8 possible injury crashes, 8 suspected injury, minor injury, and 1 suspected serious injury at that location for a total of 45 crashes. So this just, I think visually, these 2 maps help you to see where the both the severity level on that previous one and this one, just in terms of all of your crashes where they're occurring. And again, a lot of them on the state routes along 69 here through Prescott and Prescott Valley. So just give you a quick flavor. Again, as Vinny said, these will be available for you guys to play with and comment on, and hopefully it'll be of value to you as you're, looking for potential projects, but also maybe in dealing with the public and issues and complaints that are brought up from the public. And you can pull up a map like this and say, okay, yep, we see that, or no, the crash data isn't really backing you up on that one. So that's my presentation. Any questions, additional questions or comments?
Questions from the TAC?
Mr. Chair, if I may, just a quick one. On those 7 areas, Mike, was bike and ped one of those? I couldn't recall.
Both of them were bicycle and pedestrian for the 7 emphasis areas.
Yeah, I think up in my neck of the woods, I think that's the majority of the fatalities are when, because a bicycle is no match for a vehicle, so.
No. And it'll tie right into CYMPO's active transportation plan that'll be kicking off here shortly. The pedestrian and bike crash data and focus emphasis area on those 2 vulnerable road users.
Thank you.
Right. Any further questions or comments? Mike, thank you very much. It's good insight, and I appreciate the effort you're making, and we look forward to continuing to see what progress you make. And as indicated, please share your PowerPoint with CYMPO staff so it can be distributed to members.
Yep, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we do appear to have John Hughes on here. John, you're currently shown as attendee, which I'm okay with, but I'm going to have Allison move you over as a panelist because we're going to try to hit on a few things that are critical at this point. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you very nicely to be patient if you don't mind, because if we happen to lose John, we can go right back into updates that are not necessarily action required. So I thank you, Kevin, if you can just be a little patient. We would very much like to hear from you, but I'm going to try to knock a few things out here while we have John and we have a quorum. So with that, Vinny, I'm going to jump to item 10 for starters here. You want to talk about 2024 RTAC pursuit of legislative funding. So by all means, if you would like to hit on that, if you need us to take action on it, we will seek votes, in particular, most from John while he's available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. So yes, I would ask some action be taken today regarding this item. So follow me as we go through this. We're entering into our third year of an opportunity to seek one-time transportation funding through the state legislature. Again, we've already talked about some projects from 2 years ago that, again, with our delegation, we're successful in getting 1.5 million to the roundabout at 69-169. We were able to get 3 million for the on-ramps that was referenced earlier. And then Representative Wynn took it on himself with the support of the delegation to go after preservation in the town of Prescott Valley on State Route 69. The second year is just wrapped up a few weeks ago. Hopefully you've received emails from me, Kevin, with various updates on that. On that request, we went 1 for 2. We were successful again with Senator Wynn making this a standalone bill, even though the standalone didn't pass. It did pass as part of the probably the greater RTAC package. And that is 9.9 million to the town of Prescott Valley for Glassford Hill Road. Really important notes as we kind of recap what happened, because this is going to lead into where we're going from here. 2 years ago, local projects were not considered. This past year, that attitude changed. That's how Glassford Hill was considered and ultimately a part of the budget. So in the future, Heather will be giving us updates. Last we were aware of, it's an $11 million project to satisfy the legislature, our local legislature. It was important that they understood that there was skin in the game. So we did identify 10% on these projects as a local contribution. So the town expressed support in the way of about 1.1 million for that Glassford Hill project. We started out very specific with that project, and towards the end, I tried to make it more general, giving greater flexibility to the town. But essentially it was a expansion of the roadway from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, from 89A to Long Look. The second project is in Frank's area in the town of Chino Valley on State Route 89. That was for 15 to 18 million dollars. Reason for the 2 numbers is part of the RTAC bill. We capped the project because it was among other projects. So it was a $15 million ask. If you remember, though, that Representative Bliss was willing to do it as a standalone bill in order to better cover that project, and her bill for that project was $18 million. Again, working with Frank in the town of Chino Valley, Mayor Miller and others, it was understood that the town would also need to provide a local contribution around 10% for that project, at which they tentatively agreed to. Yavapai County also agreed to participate or support the town in that. So long story short, where the budget ended up, we felt great support till the very end. We're grateful for the Glassford Hill project. Unfortunately, SR 89 did not make it to the final budget. One of the challenges that, if you've heard Kevin's presentation to the executive board and how I've observed it, is each of the legislators, especially in our area, were given sources of funding in the budget. I believe Senator Bennett was given 30 million and each of our representatives were given 20. And of those pots of money, they were then able to decide among all priorities within the state of Arizona, but most especially this district, which for our purposes includes things such as transportation, but has also made the news, things like the rodeo and other things in the area. So to put maybe just to put a final cap on last year, we need to acknowledge Kevin's work, RTAC's work. We need to acknowledge CYMPO staff, me in particular, and none of this money was just freely handed over. This required a great deal of time and energy. And the reason I highlight that as you consider the projects going into next year, we need to be incredibly mindful of this. This is not just let's let the legislature know what the priorities are based upon data, based upon regional transportation plan. I wish it was, I hate to say it, that easy, but this required a great deal of my time to spend down at the Capitol, attending transportation committee meetings in the Senate and the House. Kevin was present. I need to acknowledge Councilman Tom Armstrong spent a lot of time at the Capitol. Mayor Hughes, who's on the call now, as he's our RTAC representative. There were many calls with we are tracking really good, and then they're going to the floor to make a vote, and then there's these conversations where, you know, what does it look like if we dramatically reduce a project amount, or are there other projects? So I'm trying to prime the pump today to say that as I present recommendations to you going into next year, I need as much flexibility as we can have as a region. I need obviously plan A, B, and C, and I need to try and emphasize to get everyone to understand the incredible complexity of our ask. Historically, I've attempted to recommend to the CYMPO Executive Board and to you as a TAC fewer projects. That's not the case. Right now, this is an effort by rural Arizona, and if you're not familiar, through RTAC is the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council representing us. And in greater Arizona, we have 6 MPOs, including us, and 4 councils of government that are going through this exercise. And Kevin answers to an executive board of elected officials from each of those regions. Again, ours is Mayor Hughes, and his substitute is Councilman Tom Armstrong. So the MPO COG directors have made a recommendation to that board through Kevin as the executive director. The one-time funding that RTAC went after last year was $300 million for the state of Arizona. When Kevin gives his update shortly, overall, that number was pretty much received. Now, the complexity to that is it wasn't achieved from, by no means, from where we started to where we ended. So while the bottom line dollars will illustrate great success, I've already given you an update in our region. We went after 23 million and we got 9.9 million, and there were some twists and turns to get there. As we go into this year, the recommendation is that the future of doing this is, there's a horizon to this. And we're going to stay tuned to see how the economy, the legislature, and all these things do. But the recommendation is to actually increase the request of funding from 300 million statewide to 400 million statewide. Some of the art, and this is going to trickle into what CYMPO's ask is, and I'll cut to that, maybe that'll help. Last year, we had this discussion, and what was on the table for you to consider was 23 million. This year, it's going to increase by 10 million for CYMPO to 33 million. So that's going to be our discussion today. Some of the thinking with RTAC would be that this one-time funding is not, again, the best way to do it, but because of legislative support, the economy, we've had an opportunity to pursue and take advantage of this. That's going to become less and less as things, I don't know, level out here in the next year. So this year could be very much of a transition year that we may be still able to get one time. With that said, though, it's also an opportunity to educate a lot of new legislators. In our area, we do have a new legislator in Representative Bliss. At this point, Senator Bennett's a veteran, and Representative Wynn's been around a few years, but the legislature as a whole is still relatively new when it comes to some of the bigger topics related to sustainable funding for transportation. So now to where we are today. We need to have a discussion and try and wrap it up as best we can today so that so that staff could take this to the executive board in 2 weeks. If you remember last year, we also invited the legislators from the state to join in that conversation. I do anticipate doing the same to extend the invite to Senator Bennett, Representative Wynn, and Bliss to join the executive board in a few weeks as part of that discussion. We have around $33 million to attempt to make a recommendation to the executive board. I'm making an assumption, which I'll open up to questions and comments in a moment, that as much regional support as we had for State Route 89, that project is almost an automatic to be placed back on the table and for us to put support behind it. So just tentatively for a moment, Allison, if you could bring up the illustration that shows the 33 million available and identifies the $18 million for State Route 89. Again, this is between roads 3 and 5 North. This includes a roundabout at 5 North. This includes a local contribution from the town of Chino Valley and possibly the county providing support of around $2,045,000. Now, before you look at the project name, I want to show you the dollar amount because this is really where we're focused in on. So on row B, if we look at the blue purple line total request, if you agree with the recommendation that I'm making today that we ask the legislature for 18.4 million for 89, that leaves a balance of discussion today of $15.2 million. So as you take action in this item, I'm going to be looking for the recommendation of how that well, actually the whole amount, but in particular, the 15.2 million would be spent. Something that we need to acknowledge from last year in the discussion that this TAC had, in order for there to be an agreement that Glassford Hill Road would be the #1 project for CYMPO being a local road, there was a couple things that needed to be acknowledged. Number one, the legislature 2 years ago did not consider local roads. This year they did. So we had that going into the year. We weren't certain how that would pan out. Well, today it panned out. At that time, the city of Prescott expressed support for that project in the neighboring community. But the comment that was offered at that time was acknowledging that their priority for this year would be State Route 89 through the Granite Dells area. As we talk about that project today and where that lies, I need to remind the TAC that as we look at any of these projects, I would ask you to help me look at these from multiple angles. I will acknowledge that 89 through the Dells is the #1 project in the region according to the regional transportation plan. So that is an area that has been prioritized. Prescott is attempting to move forward with that. The note to that corridor is as it relates to the greater public engagement, which the city of Prescott is well aware of. And I believe they're going to be starting public engagement actively very soon as it relates to any expansion of the road through the Dells and how that impacts the environment. So the reason why that's important to us, as you may consider that a project, I need you to understand what that looks like for CYMPO as a whole organization and what that looks like for me to be attempting to lead this conversation. When we look at some of the public engagement and comments received on the Sundog Connector, it would be a great challenge for CYMPO to join the city of Prescott in this particular project. It shouldn't be not considered. I do think you should consider it today, but I would have, as the executive director, a great deal of hesitation of going from the Sundog, if you will, wrapping up to then participating with the city and advocating for monies through this corridor with the public engagement part. Keeping that in mind, the recommendation that I have for you today as a TAC is something I would consider much more palatable. And I should back up one thing too, is Ian wanted to join us. He has some family issues to take care of. He has emailed me, that he's hoping you would consider 89 through the Dells. The deputy director is also out of the office. So he's aware of the conversation at hand. He's also aware of what I'm about to propose to you. He's very much in support of this, but he also understands the conversation we had last year. Also, that project through the Dells is estimated, I believe right now, around $25 million. Half of that project is identified for utility infrastructure, water infrastructure, and the other half of the dollars is identified for road improvements. So where I'm at is a recommendation to you of regional, what I'm calling regional preservation. You can get more technical on it, but what MPO and COGS identified in this last cycle of projects was a number of projects to preserve the infrastructure. From our local level, if we use a population breakdown, you see it in that bottom right corner, that if we use our current population breakdown and we divided that 15 million up among the 5 jurisdictions, I won't list them all, but you can see where Prescott Valley would get 4.9 million. The town of Dewey Humboldt would get just under $500,000. This is most appealing to me when attempting to, I don't know, sell it, convey it to our legislature. They appreciate trying to help out as much as they can. They understand the investment that's taken place. Couple things before you attempt to make a commitment to this that I need to be prepared. Where I sit today is I would love to be able to advocate, support, pushing out money to all 5 areas as best we can, most especially Dewey, Humboldt, and Chino Valley that often in a region end up without projects where we highlight other projects. So that's my greatest hope. One concern I have going into the legislative discussion is where the legislature will draw lines to what we had 2 years ago that would say, no, we're only going to focus on highway, to last year that says, okay, we're going to open the door to local roads, but I would probably put a key asterisk next to that, regionally significant roads, whereas this option for us can push the issue even further and makes me a little bit concerned. Where as much as I want to give full local control, what language will they put in the bill that may tie all of our hands, yours in particular? And I was talking with Frank about this yesterday of, if these end up being identified with some language that say regionally significant or a classification of say arterial or more, collector or more, whatever it ends up being. And through that conversation, Frank was able to help me identify within the town where some of those would apply. So if it's up to me, we would keep the language as broad, give you and your respective authorities the ability to program these funds. It's a great thing to be able to spread money out evenly. Last year, the horse trading was Prescott saying, hey, we'll support Glassford, but 89 Dells, things like that. So that's where I feel this could be great. I believe if Ian was here and he had shared me the data, again, if we were able to get Prescott almost 5 million for preservation, I believe he said his whole preservation program is a little over $8 million. So again, if I just use that, this could be one heck of a shot in the arm for all of you if I understand everyone's budget relative to that, let's say. And then I'll pause for a question, but I have one more piece and then I'll turn it over to you.
So just for clarification's sake, the $8 million is all roads. It's not their regionally significant roads. That is local roads. That is, you're comparing apples to oranges a little bit when that, and I noticed that in Ian's email, that we got to be a little careful about that, because I do feel like if we're asking to, get state money to do pavement pres on a subdivision road or something like that, I think we're really hanging ourselves out there for having the scissors come along and cut us off the bottom of the budget proposal, if you know what I mean.
So I do know what you mean, Dan. And I guess this is where, again, there's just so many twists and turns along the legislative session. So my hope is to actually challenge that slightly, to have both options. That I'm going to attempt, if this is what you agree to, that we have as much general language, again, as much flexibility, but with a very educated projection to what Dan said, that as people start looking at it, it's going to get to that language that does it. So that's where I'm trying to start us off a little more general. And the example I would give you, and this should be noted, I've already received a call from Representative Wynn, who's identified the old Black Canyon Highway going west from Stone Ridge 269 as a real need for an improvement. And the reason why that's an example is, as much as we can sit in this room and the board in a couple of weeks, the legislature has the authority to come along and pick all sorts of things that we may or may not see within our parameters. So to be mindful of that as we go into it. And then if I could just wrap up on this last part. So I've talked about 89 through the Dells. I've talked about regional preservation. The last thing that would probably be in most of your head is State Route 69. This is getting a little bit more attention as we talk about the Sundog connector. When you look at some of the comments that have been received to date opposing the Sundog connector, the comments would very often include place the money that you would do on Sundog on 69 is probably the best way to summarize that. So with that said, I've reached out to our consultant who's doing our 69 master corridor plan. Again, incredibly preliminary, but you need to have this. Posing the question, if we had $15 million identified for State Route 69, which segment right now is really rising to the top most notably? And he, along with me, cannot emphasize enough that this is preliminary, but it should be enough to help make some decisions today. The segments that are rising to the top are in the town of Prescott Valley on State Route 69. Segment 1 would be from Prescott East Highway going east to Glassford Hill. That's segment 1, looking at an expansion of the highway there. And then segment 2 is also in Prescott Valley, going from Glassford Hill Road to Navajo Road. So if there was an consideration of monies through the state legislature for 69, that would be the segment. And as most of you would then speculate, as it possibly relates to the Sundog connector, that would be a unique monies to apply as it relates to that project, because that project would speak a little bit more to the traffic between Prescott Valley and Prescott, whereas if monies were to be put on 69 today would improve circulation, yes, for the whole corridor, but with an emphasis in the town of Prescott Valley versus between Prescott Valley and Prescott. So I've given you a bunch, I've laid it out there. I've made a recommendation that it's regional preservation. And with that said, I am now happy to take all your questions and comments, unless you fully agree.
You have a scenario B, because that says scenario A.
Oh, it does. Yeah, you're right. We'll change that if you go with scenario B. Heather.
Sure. Just a quick question on the Chino Valley. Has that cost estimate been updated to account, or are we just carrying over the cost from last budget year?
At this point, Heather and Chairman, so that is not being updated. I will tell you, compared to what the town submitted for Glassford, that was a pretty detailed estimate. What we received, this is an ADOT facility. What we received from ADOT was nowhere near what we got on Glassford Hill, meaning this is a very, very rough estimate. What we received before, and there's no, as far as I know, we're not planning to update that at this time, but it's worth the note in the conversation.
I just look at that for inflation purposes and current construction costs
Yeah,
before we give away money elsewhere.
I will say, I guess in my back pocket that I think you sort of gave me, I don't remember, but I have this in my back pocket. As monies were being negotiated at the Capitol, there was a conversation at one moment where the roundabout at 5 North may be dropped off to reduce the cost of the project, looking at expansion between 3 and 5 North of that corridor, and to drop off the roundabout. I think if I understood from an engineering standpoint, that was not preferred, but it could be lived with if monies were reduced. So that's another thing to be mindful of.
yeah, just for, as far as I know, Vinny, from my point of view, that's true. There's been very little actual engineering work done for the estimate at this point. But again, just for the overall corridor, and I think it's the long-term goal planning wise to probably divide that road all the way up through Paulden to the Forest Service boundary at least, knowing that that's very expensive and a very long-term goal, but I think the traffic counts probably support it, along with the safety measures. Few of the HSIP projects we looked at there were in that same corridor through the Dells, not the Dells, but through Del Rio area. So that's kind of look at that. And ADOT's actually been expanding. They did hopscotch a little bit inside Chino Valley, but then the last project I think was in Prescott from 89A up to Deep Well roundabout was the last segment. So that actually was a big boon there. But again, to your point, it's probably a crude estimate, and as the scoping narrows it down, it would be a lot, you could scope the project to fit the budget a lot better and know where you're at as the future moves on. One of the benefits is there's already a roundabout put at 4 North that was it's already divided and ready to accept a 4-lane divided road. So that was put in years ago before I was even there. So I've been there 6 years now. So.
Well, I guess from my perspective on this, I mean, I drive the roads around here. They need pavement press. It's pretty obvious. ADOT is first and foremost, but of course they're not on the list here. So they got to go out and fight for their own pavement press money, it seems, which, hopefully with what got approved this year, they've got some coming to help with that. The county's been dumping money in pavement press for quite some time because we find that it's more cost effective to do that. And a lot of our regional roads, and I'm thinking in the CYMPO region, thinking Pioneer Parkway, Williamson Valley, Iron Springs Road, or the Walker Road, Senator Highway to a degree, they're all in pretty good shape. So, if it turns out this way, I got $3.5 million coming into the county, I got to find somewhere to put that. And I'm not going to say it doesn't exist out there. I just need to have a little time to figure out where it is we're going to direct that. I assume, Vinny, you would prefer that it remain within the CYMPO boundaries rather than blurring those lines a little bit and getting into something that maybe feeds the CYMPO area, but give that some thought from a political cell standpoint. So.
Yeah, good point. I would be, my preference would be within the border of CYMPO, but from a true regional effort, I don't think it would be detrimental if it went into obviously the neighboring NACOG region for Yavapai County. Again, I'm battling a little bit to lessen the complexity of what could happen, maybe to Dan's point. Because what's going to happen if you go along with this is they're not going to write a blank check. We know that. So how, and this is going to be done through Lindsay again, you know, having two projects to create an infographic for was wonderful, beautiful, easy to talk about these projects all day. So now what happens, again, picking on the county, 3.5 million, how do we illustrate that in a marketable way of fewer projects, regionally significant, describe that. And that illustration is going to go a long ways to literally, when we're at the Rural Summit in October and there's a book that put together of 400 million of projects, how do we illustrate these 15 million to not only advocate for them, but literally describe the mechanics of them? And again, do they meet some possible standard language of, again, regionally significant, collector and above, arterial and above, wherever that lands? So, yeah.
Is it, does the fact that you're tying it strictly to pavement pres make it easier sell for you? Like if we put that 3.5 towards something else within CYMPO boundary that was a right size project, are you gonna object to that, or
No.
other member agencies gonna object to that?
I would not object to it. And I, as I was flipping through the book last year, and again, this is where I'm clearly, I don't know enough to be dangerous in this conversation, talking to public works people here. We can play with the terminology because as I flipped through the book, from what other regions were doing, you know, I came across, you know, a variety of language of resurfacing, of replacement, and everybody, because it's really up to each MPO and COG of how they're identifying it, reconstruction, you know, so there's nobody saying, hey, if you name it, look at pavement overlay, I'm just flipping through it now. So to Dan's point, just for placeholder purposes, I said preservation, but if there's a better term and that covers what you all do in a different way, so be it. I do think projects will need to be identified. And I'm gonna, from just my attempt to present this, need to call this category something, whatever that is. I would avoid expansion and modernization, but from that's where I've been calling it preservation.
And great questions. In Prescott Valley, majority of our roads are chip seal. I can't do a pavement preservation on chip seal. And we're moving to tearing out chip seal and actually moving a pavement section of those roadways, right? And so, yeah, you're probably in the same boat we are. And so the pavement pres, I love Dan's question. Can we utilize whatever we call it for whatever type of site and whatever, if it's full depth reclamation or if it's a micro seal or slurry seal or whatever, incumbent upon the, you know, the area to determine that, and how does that work?
I think Vinny has kind of answered that question, but I do think it's important to keep these things in checks instead of having a list of 15 different roads that we're going to dump the money on, because that's going to, I feel that really diminishes the value in the eyes of a legislator.
I would agree.
So,
And I think, you know, trying to be fair to the smaller member agencies.
yeah,
How do we write it so they can utilize it on
I agree.
their smaller roads if they don't have?
I agree. Well, and Frankie, I'm sure you got ideas. You must have, with the way your, you know, primary road system's laid out, you probably got good options for that on the east-west or the north-south roads and things.
Yeah,
like that. So,
I don't want to speak for Mayor Hughes, but for Chino Valley, for example, the next project on our CIP list is a $1.5 million job on Road 1 East in front of Territorial School, right? In front of an elementary school, significant to the area. And also I was explaining to Vinny, Road 1 East actually will likely serve as an alternate route to Highway 89 if there's some sort of accident that shuts down the highway. That was the whole reason that a portion of Road 1 East on the south end of town had to be constructed from 3 to 5 south. That was part of the deal of when they widened that area of the highway, that the town construct that portion of 1 East to provide that alternate route. So we've got roads like that I don't know how, as far as traffic counts, if they function regionally significant, compared to say Highway 89 through Chino, that's 30,000 a day. Road 1 East might have 5 or 6, but look at how it functions. There's not many alternates to Highway 89 in that area, except for the local roads. We call them arterials in our town because they connect the neighborhoods to neighborhoods. But traffic wise, with a town of 12, 13,000 people, the local roads just don't see the amount of traffic as the highway does. So, but still function that way to us. And again, most of our roads are, like you said, dull. Got about 80 miles of chip seal roads out of the 150 in our network. And lately, council has been very supportive of going through and just pulverizing them and putting actual pavement down that can support the structure of trucks.
I love this idea. Don't get me wrong. I love this idea.
And I do want to add the Dewey Humboldt part. I have that illustrated here. I think I've talked to you all individually. We are of a strong belief, to Heather's point, we want everyone to be a part of this. Where I said I'm really struggling as I project into the year, again, how Dewey Humboldt stays a part of that when you look at it from the state general fund, where those dollars are going, to Dan's point earlier, how local are we getting here? How local can we go? That's where, again, a Dewey Humboldt that does not have regionally significant roads outside of the state highway, we need to just be transparent at this point. They're here. I hope to keep them on that list if you go in this direction as much as we can. But I might be incredibly creative, but I just don't know how they maintain to the finish line at this point.
All right. Well, so you're looking for some action on this, Vinny. I'm behind this. I really am, but I also feel like we made a promise last year on 89 through the Dells. So I'm going to say it again, that this is important, that we, hold to that. If the city comes back and says, where to go on this, how do you feel about that?
I have incredibly strong feelings about it. And those feelings need to be understood, thoughts, I should say, that when CYMPO places this priority, again, what are the mechanics of that? What does that look like? It's not just CYMPO has declared it so. It's me as the executive director working directly with Senator Bennett, Representative Lynn, Representative Bliss on behalf of the region, helping them to understand these projects. And then you have the greater public engagement part of this. So again, looking at this last year, working with the town of Chino Valley, town of Prescott Valley, ADOT, there's a great deal of where I'm going with this, Dan, is as we look at that Prescott project, it's the same thing that I vocalized last year, that has an incredible amount of above and beyond public engagement aspects to it.
Yeah.
So last year, I encouraged you to avoid that project. I appreciate the group discussion. Well, here we are a year later. I appreciate that Prescott is doing a great deal of public engagement. I struggle to see putting CYMPO in the position of an advocate for a public engagement challenge.
Can I maybe comment on that?
Sure.
I want to, Mr. Chair, with your permission, to preface it by saying I deeply regret Ian's not here to get the opinion.
He regrets not being here too.
But my understanding was that Prescott was holding off until they go through the public process with this. Does it matter that I don't know that process?
It's gearing up.
Yeah,
So I'm fine. Vinny's explanation is well received by me, and I don't know, it sounds like it probably is by you. So, with that, and I think we still have John on here. So, John, we're gonna, yeah, thank you.
You guys.
All right, so I'm gonna make a motion to recommend to the executive board to approve the 2024 CYMPO RTEC priority projects as presented here with the State Route 89 improvements and the pavement preservation funds, which are not, of course, specifically identified yet, but we can hash those out in the future. And Vinny, feel free to move forward with discussion with the executive board on that. And I need a second on that, please.
Second.
All right, thank you, John.
And I'm sorry.
Further discussion, Vinny?
Yeah. As part of your action, I would feel a little bit better where you are so far, but I need a little additional. So if that's plan A, can we consider a plan B? Do we want it to be State Route 69 in the town of Prescott Valley as we continue to get information? And then a plan C is 89 through the Dells? Is that a fair recommendation? So when I get to the board, that again, I have a high level of confidence this preservation could really get traction. But I need something to fall back on if that for some reason starts to fall apart where you guys are as a TAC.
All right, so let's discuss that, I guess. So 89, I'm sorry, 69 in the town of Prescott Valley clearly has needs, as has been touched on with Vamshi and Kittleson. I'm with you, Vinny, in regards to, you know, directing the funds where it needs to be, but if you're trying to avoid political hot potatoes, that's another one where it's like people are quite torn up about, you know, why aren't we widening 69, widening 69, widening 69? You know, they're talking about between Sundog and the existing project that we got going on. And so are we putting ourselves into a position where we're advocating for something different than what is one of theirs as well?
And absolutely fair point, Dan, thank you. So I would say the challenge is finding right now the data, which again, I know it's multifaceted, but the data to support it right now. If that 69 master corridor plan, looking at the 18 miles from Prescott to Dewey Humboldt or dropped on the table, it just appears the greatest needs in that 18 miles is between Prescott East and Navajo.
Okay.
So we would be hard pressed to identify a project that wouldn't be ranked at the top of that. Not that those other segments you referred to, Dan, won't be in there, they will be. But if you're looking for additional backing of safety and capacity, we're going to be stepping out on a little bit weaker branch on that one.
Okay. So, yes, absolutely, Heather.
In the regional transportation plan, which ranks higher right now? Is it the Dells?
89 is number one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In the whole region, 89
Yeah.
through the Dells is
Yeah.
number one.
Yeah, and we're all keen on seeing something happen there, but as has been touched on here, it is a potential public nightmare. Even though I think even the people that are against damage to the Dells and whatnot would recognize that it's a bottleneck. So, you know, there's going to have to be some significant and thorough political discussion as to where things want to go on that, and I'm happy to be patient on it. And who knows where we'll be a year from now? We'll probably be having a similar conversation. But as Vinny touched on early on, it's possible there won't be this anticipated one-time funding again that is coming because the state is doing so well. If we have a little turn down in the economy, this is the first thing that dries up and we go back to doing our jobs without the influx of state money. Correct, Vinny? Correct. Okay. So I will amend my motion to prioritize segment or segments through on State Route 69 in the town of Prescott Valley, as has been preliminarily assessed as option B, and State Route 89 through the Dells widening as option C. Does that cover your
That's
expectation?
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
fine.
And John, would you like to reaffirm your second?
Yes, yes, I reaffirm with the additions.
All right, thank you. I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Myrna. So that passes unanimously with a quorum, just for the record. And John, thanks for being on here. Vinny, would you like me to keep moving on some of these action items? John, are you in a good spot to be on a while? Can we come back to action items?
Sounds good to me.
Sorry.
Yeah, sounds good to me. If something happens, I'll dial right back.
All right, I'm gonna get Kevin out of the way then, if you don't mind. Number 9, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And based on the conversation from the previous agenda item, I think I'm going to try to focus my update on process and how that's relevant to next year. So where we're at with the current session, technically they have not adjourned sine die. About a month ago, they were able to enact the budget. They've actually taken a month off. They're going to adjourn or reconvene on Monday. There are quite a few outstanding issues that they're hoping to resolve, including whether or not Maricopa County will have the authority to take to their voters an extension of the Prop 400 transportation regional sales tax, which expires at the end of 25. But the budget was enacted. Very curious set of circumstances went into that. I think it was a very unpredictable year. I think you look at the makeup. This is the first time we've had split partisan control in 14 years. New governor, new speaker, new Senate president. The two chambers couldn't be more evenly split at 31-29 and 16-14. And over half of the members of both chambers are brand new. So there were a lot of new pieces going into putting this budget together. And I think the glue, or what actually made it possible for the budget to pass under these extremely difficult circumstances, was that they had this very substantial revenue surplus to work with. And, keep in mind, much of that is because of the economy performing well. But that was also greatly factored by the federal and state responses to COVID, going back 4 years, which sort of artificially created even greater surpluses. And we know for a fact that that is not going to continue. So even if we're in a situation where the economy continues to still perform very well, we're probably not going to see the surplus levels that we have the last 2-3 years. I think we've got one more year where they'll be sort of artificially elevated. So I think there's one more crack at trying to direct these very one-time levels of surpluses to the infrastructure. So what really I think made that process work this year, as far as being able to pass a budget, was the fact that they had this very high surplus level, high enough to where they believed that they had enough to where they could allocate a very specific amount to each legislator that they could direct where it went in the budget. 30 million for the senators and 20 million for each of the House members. And keep in mind that this wasn't exclusively for capital improvements, so it wasn't transportation competing against water projects. This ran the whole gamut of what's included in the state budget. So members allocated money to K-12, to homeless assistance, to housing programs, as well as to tax credits. So the funding was, they were able to direct funding to a whole host of categories. There was about 2 billion in one-time funding that was available. 650 million of that went to transportation. So I think we fared very well. If anything, I think if you look at the RTAC bill in our process, probably the biggest criticism is that the funding wasn't directed to as many of the specific projects that were in our bill as we would have liked. But on the positive, I think that the compiling that list and making a push for it helped demonstrate the level of need that is out there and the level of demand. And so I think overall it did help boost the total or the net level of funding that was directed to transportation. So of that 650 million, there was 89 million that went to the I-10 widening between Casa Grande and Chandler, 76.2 million for cost adjustments to the I-17 widening. Then there was roughly another 400 million that went to projects across the state, including 27 projects that were in the RTAC list, including the Glassford Hill Road project. In addition to that, and this is where things got quite complicated, this has been the third year that we've had earmarks, and of course they are a lot more rigid than the discretionary funding that ADOT and locals have to work with. And so what occurred was there was a lot of reshuffling of funding that was appropriated in previous years. So some projects lost funding, others received additional funding, some were deleted or deferred, and there were a couple of new projects that were added through appropriations from previous years. But there was a net increase of about 23.4 million from previous year's appropriations. Couple of other big items were 54.3 million for pavement rehab for ADOT, and that gets back to an earlier question as far as what's the best way to characterize sort of this maintenance activity. And the specific terminology that has been used, at least for the ADOT funding, has been pavement rehabilitation. So that may be the direction that you want to go. And I'll also mention that 54.3 million came right after the governor signing an executive order to use roughly 50 million in ADOT contingency funds for pavement rehab for a lot of maintenance and repair as a result of this last winter, where in particular, large parts of northern Arizona really got hammered hard, and there were even some interstate sections that needed some emergency repairs done. The other big item was the SMART fund. I think that we want to try to maximize the level of federal funding that we're able to bring back with all of the competitive grant funding that will be available, at least for the duration of the IIJA. Actually, I would have liked to have seen more than 12.5 million, but at least that was appropriated. I highly suspect that our TAC will be advocating for an even higher level of funding to be directed to the SMART Fund next year. But those were the big funding areas. As far as the earmarks are concerned, again, the senators were provided the 30 million, the House members 20, and that wasn't just for capital improvement. So again, we need to help make the case that they emphasize transportation, but then those legislators have a tremendous amount of discretion as far as where it goes. And so for next year's CYMPO priorities, I think what's going to be key is working with your three legislators and getting them on board and supportive with the direction that you would like to go. I can tell you that specificity for the most part has been really important. That's why I can think back to 20 years and then also in the 90s when they had surplus revenue to work with, they actually did a supplemental appropriation to HERF, and then that allowed both ADOT on the state side and then each of the local governments on the local HERF side to have complete discretion. That funding was basically allocated through the HERF distribution process, and all of the entities had wide discretion in how they were to use it. Unfortunately, that's not politically viable with our lawmakers right now. They want to know specifically how that funding is going to be used. And so as you decide what to do, if you go through with this pavement pres suballocation to each jurisdiction, I think the key is going to be making sure it's crafted in a way that your three legislators support. So the broader, the better, provided that they're willing to support whatever language it is that you use. We, I'd say, looking at other examples from across the state, I think, again, specificity does help. I know Vinny's real familiar with the Lake Havasu MPO, and they basically divided their allocation into 7 specific projects. It was all pavement rehabilitation, but they were able to specify the specific street roads that would be getting the treatment, as well as sort of the 2 endpoints for each one of those. And so I think that would be helpful, but if you can get your legislators to support something as broad as pavement rehabilitation within the jurisdictional boundaries of Prescott Valley, then great. So the key, provided there's going to be enough funding to where each legislator is provided a level of their own funding to allocate. If you can get them behind something that broad, then I think that's certainly acceptable. So the real key is going to be getting your 3 specific legislators supportive and engaged on including whatever projects you develop into the budget. So that's certainly a lot of information to throw at you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions? Kevin,
Mr. Chair, and one other quick point, and getting back to there was some concern over whether you're targeting roads that are functionally classified, and how small of a residential road can you include? And this is state general fund revenue, so there's no restriction there. So provided you can get your legislators to support it, the sort of that classification or the non-classification of that road should not be a barrier.
That was my understanding as well, Kevin. I just was thinking from a political sell standpoint.
Right. It's
Something with a higher volume becomes an easier sell politically. That was
yes. And if they go through the same process as last year, it's really going to be up to what do your three legislators, what are they willing to support?
agreed. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate that very much. We're going to move on.
I just have one comment.
Oh, sorry, Vinny's got a comment.
Just thank you, Kevin, but I just need to ask our TAC members that Lindsay and I are going to be in contact with you. It's going to be critical between now and the executive board meeting. In the spirit of what Kevin just said, again, understand that my plan A is to try and get everyone a blank check. With that in mind, though, I want plan B to be what Kevin said. So I'm going to turn over those numbers to you. And I really do need to hear from each of you how you would program those monies. Again, Prescott Valley, 4.9 million. If that's the case, what specific projects would you be able to list that are going to help the executive board make a decision on this 15 million? And again, if we need to have those specifics, will we be able to illustrate them to some degree at the board meeting? So we'll send out an email in the next day or two, but please just be prepared to respond to those dollar amounts and to help us illustrate that to the board. And Myrna has her hand up. Yeah.
Myrna, yes, go ahead, please.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to follow up on what Kevin just said about, the language and specificity when it comes to what type of project you're looking at. So there's a lot of, whether it's pavement rehab, pavement preservation. ADOT actually has a definition, of what each one is. So if it helps this body, I would be more than happy to forward that over to you, or I can even ask Kevin Robertson to come and speak so that you can have an exact definition of what each one is. So if you have a segment of road that you're looking at, that you can actually identify what type of work it needs that are based on standards, state standards.
Myrna, I'm going to ask if you could pull that language just to provide to CYMPO staff, and they can include it when they send out an email looking for input from member agencies, please.
I would be happy to. Thank you.
Thanks. And if you could please copy me on those definitions, whether directly from Myrna or from CYMPO, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. I'll include you in the email, Kevin.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make one quick.
Yes, Frank.
We try and be brief. Just to emphasize maybe what Kevin was talking about as Vinny starts crafting this for presentation to the board is also making sure it's something that our legislators will support, even if you look at, B and C, plan B and C on the list, making sure that that's also something they would support. Because I think that's key in whatever we do, that you're going to need their full, no less than their full support on whatever go with.
Yeah, and Frank, just to reemphasize that, and not just the type of project, but the specificity. If ideally you want to keep it as broad as possible, and so you need that buy-in from the legislators, from your three legislators, as far as what they're comfortable with and willing to support, as far as that, how broadly the project's defined.
All right. Thank you. Not hearing any further comments or discussion. I'm going to move on. We are really running along here today, and I apologize for that, but there's been a need for quite a bit of discussion. That brings us to, brings us to item 11, which is presentation and training in regards to Title VI. I'm hoping we can do this in some expedited fashion and try to move on. I realize Heather has not been exposed to this in the past in regards to our Title VI plan, public involvement plan, limited English proficiency plan. But I know we got Sarah here, and Sarah, I hope I don't upset you if I try to just move on with this and move towards an action for this. But let me ask Heather, how badly do you want to hear the training phase of this? So, Allison, thoughts?
Well, Mr. Chair, as part of our Title VI plan, we do include an annual training.
So we are mandated to have it as part of our plan. Is that what you're telling me?
I think it would be a good idea to.
Okay, that's fine. So with that, I'm going to do item 11 here. Sarah, I don't know if Allison, if you want to give any preamble before Sarah speaks, but Sarah, I just ask that you be as quick as possible, please.
Thank you, Sarah, for hanging on with us. So about this time every year, CYMPO reviews our Title VI plan and updates it as necessary. As recipients of federal funding, we're required to adopt our own Title VI plan, which also includes a limited English proficiency plan and public involvement plan. So we work closely with ADOT Civil Rights Office to ensure that our plan is compliant and that we're implementing the best practices. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sarah, and you can provide us your brief presentation.
Great. Thank you, Allison. It's all yours, Sarah.
Thank you, and thanks, Allison. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and do a presentation on Title VI. So yeah, my name is Sarah Martinez. I am the Civil Rights Specialist at ADOT Civil Rights Office, and today we'll be doing our annual training on Title VI. First, we're going to start with non-discrimination regulations. So the two in the left are laws that we have to follow. So we have the Title VI of the Civil Rights of 1964, which states that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Then we have the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987, which states that Title VI shall be applied institution-wide. It is not limited to federally funded programs. So since ADOT receives federal funds and we pass those funds to CYMPO, both agencies are required to be compliant with Title VI. And then in the right side, we have two executive orders. So we have Executive Order 13166, which covers the limited English proficiency program. And limited English proficiency is an individual who has limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English. And the executive order states that people who are LEP should have meaningful access to federally conducted and federally funded programs and activities. So this is why we're required to have materials available in other languages. And then we have Executive Order 12898, which covers environmental justice. The goal of this executive order is to avoid, minimize, or mitigate disproportionately high and adverse human health and environmental effects, including interrelated social and economic effects on minority populations and low-income populations. And so, in a nutshell, what does Title VI ensure? So Title VI ensures that recipients of federal financial assistance do not deny service or benefit on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, provide a service or benefit that is different from that is provided to others, and restrict an individual in enjoyment of any advantage or privilege enjoyed by others. And then here I have a slide for the Arizona demographic profile. I won't go over all of these bullet points, but I just wanted to show this data. It is significant because these are the needs of the people that we serve. So for example, when you prepare for virtual public meetings, keep in mind that 12.6% of the Arizona population does not have access to the internet. So incorporating a phone number for them to participate in the meeting would be sufficient to show that there are efforts to include low-income individuals. And understanding your community through demographics help you understand and develop meaningful community outreach strategies. So that's why we have this slide here with data. And then now the ADOT Civil Rights Office, we conduct compliance oversight over Title VI programs for FHWA and FDA subrecipients through various methods. So we have the Title VI implementation plan, the goals and accomplishment report, on-site compliance review visits, and technical assistance and training. So I will go briefly over each one of these. So we have the Title VI implementation plan. The Title VI implementation plan includes the standard operating procedures for the agency's Title VI program. It must be submitted annually to ADOT Civil Rights Office on August 1st. And we also offer preliminary reviews 2 months prior to that deadline. So we have received CYMPOs for preliminary review. We have provided feedback. So that's optional. And then now, just as a reminder, Title VI implementation plans are intended to be public documents. They are meant to convey the operations of the Title VI program and be user-friendly and accessible to members of the public. So just keep in mind that the documents that you submit are dynamic documents and they are always reflective of real processes. Therefore, if the implementation plan, for example, states that the Title VI coordinator conducts program area reviews, that must occur. And then these are the elements of the Title VI implementation plan. Now, because of time, I won't go into detail. However, there are 18 items that should be included in the implementation plan. They don't have to follow the order that I have here in the picture. Now, the Title VI implementation plan for CYMPO is in place. Now, these items have already been addressed in the implementation plan, but as always, feel more than welcome to reach out to our office for further assistance if you plan on making any updates and you need some guidance on how to write, those updates in the implementation plan. So here's the second part. Now for CYMPO, we have added the additional requirements of the committee membership description and then the executive board review approval minutes. And then in this slide, I will go over the goals and accomplishment report. This one's also due to ADOT Civil Rights Office on August 1st. It must document the progress toward compliance with Title VI, so include accomplishments that the agency has achieved in the area of Title VI, such as program area reviews, training, and processing of Title VI complaints, and goals for the upcoming year in relation to the Title VI program. So I would highly recommend including this training as part of your accomplishments for the submission of this fiscal year. And then for on-site compliance reviews, our office will visit the agency to review its FHWA funded projects and programs, also FDA, and how the Title VI processes and implementation plan are working in practice. Now, these on-site reviews do not take place annually. These are determined by conducting a high-risk assessment, which considers factors such as the date of the last on-site review, complaints, deficiencies found in the initial review of the Title VI implementation plan, and the goals and accomplishment report. So on average, every year, we visit 4 to 5 agencies. If you're selected for an on-site compliance review, we would let you know during the first 2 or 3 months of the year. And then for technical assistance and training, so our office provides assistance to the agency on Title VI subject matters at all times. So if you have any questions or if you need any assistance, feel more than welcome to reach out to our office. We also provide an annual FHWA/FDA training every summer. So this year's training will be in person and it will be on June 20th of this month. June 20th. Now, I'll briefly go over the role of the Title VI coordinator. All subrecipients should have a Title VI coordinator. The coordinator is responsible for being knowledgeable of the processes in the agency's Title VI implementation plan and ensure the implementation of Title VI processes are being followed within the agency. Now, this does not mean that the coordinator is the only person completing these processes, but rather that the coordinator has a way of ensuring that the processes are being completed. And part of the plan involves compliance and enforcement. So although the coordinator does not need to complete everything on their own, they do need to be able to ensure that everything's being completed. If there are processes that you're not sure about, you can always refer to your implementation plan for guidance, or you can contact our office. And then I'll briefly go over the limited English proficiency and environmental justice efforts in public involvement. So your agency's Title VI plan should include the standard process that your agency follows to ensure that low-income and minority populations are being engaged and outreach in the transportation planning process. Title VI coordinators should periodically review directives of their agency for disparate impacts from a Title VI perspective. And disparate impacts can occur when a policy or practice that is neutral in its face has significantly negative impact on members of a protected group. So one example of disparate impact would be an English-only policy that is applied in the workplace. And so another example would be virtual meetings where they don't allow room for people without internet access to participate. And so the Title VI coordinator should describe how it carries out this review requirement, how they make sure that there are no disparate impacts when new policies are created. And as we're talking about virtual public involvement, it is important that we consider LEP individuals, minorities, and low-income individuals in the virtual public involvement process. So here are some things to consider during virtual public meetings. So before public meeting, make sure you consider how you're disseminating information to EJ and LEP individuals. During the public meeting, how you're disseminating Title VI non-discrimination notice to the public during the meeting, and how is the demographic data collected. And then after the public meeting, consider what does the demographic data analysis show about your LEP and EJ efforts, and what program area reviews have been conducted on the public involvement process. Moving on to Title VI complaints. For CYMPO, always make sure to notify ADOT Civil Rights Office within 72 hours of receiving a complaint, regardless of whether the complaint is related to an FHWA or FTA program. Now, if the Title VI complaint is related to an FHWA funded program, service, or activity, investigate the complaint. Following your agency's procedures for FTA complaints, make sure to refer to your agency's Title VI implementation plan to see specifically how FTA complaints will be handled and processed. Now, if the Title VI complaints related to an FHWA funded program, service, or activity, do not investigate the Title VI complaint. Make sure to forward it to FHWA, and FHWA will conduct investigation. And so I just want to open the room for any questions. I managed to keep the presentation under 10 minutes, but do we have any questions for the ADOT Civil Rights Office or about the training?
Thank you, Sarah. We greatly appreciate you being brief and expedited. Any questions from CYMPO member agencies or people online? If you want to check, let's make sure we don't have any hands raised online. Yes, Heather.
Is this for only federal highway funding, or is this also apply to state funding? That's my first question.
It's federal funding that we're required for this.
And then
FTA as well, just so you know. What you said, FHWA, but also the FTA, which is the 5307 funds that you get.
okay. And then second question, each individual agency has to have this Title VI coordinator in their agency, or
No,
is that
no,
a CYMPO?
it's a CYMPO thing.
Okay.
Just within CYMPO.
Yeah.
A question.
Thank you.
We provide that oversight of the federal funds that you all utilize. Part of the program is that we would have this Title VI coordinator that is available through that funding for all of you, basically, but through the CYMPO office.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Questions online, Allison? Okay, all right. Sarah, thank you very, very much. Anything further?
No, I just wanted to thank you for your time. As always, feel more than welcome to contact our office if you have any questions. I really appreciate you today, and thank you, Allison, for inviting me to join your training for Title VI. As always, make sure to record this as an accomplishment, and thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, and we apologize for the long duration wait here. I think next time we'll try to get you up towards the top so we can get this thing and not have you sit through our entire discussion and meeting. So greatly appreciate your patience and your time. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 12, review, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval of the fiscal year 2024 Title VI Plan, Public Involvement Plan, and Limited English Proficiency Plan. Allison, do you want to go over this any?
Well, I would just say that it's been reviewed by the ADOT Civil Rights Office. We've
Okay.
included any suggestions that they had, but not much has changed from the last plan.
Yeah,
So I would
and
just.
things are highlighted in there where we're making changes. I noticed that. So dates and things like that. So
Unless anyone has any questions, I don't have anything to share.
there were no questions for this, but if there are, please raise them. And then I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the executive board approve CYMPO FY24 Title VI plan, including the limited English proficiency plan and public involvement plan.
A second.
I have a motion from member. I have a second from member Reuter. Sorry, John, you're too slow. But we appreciate that you're still there because we're gonna call for a vote here. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, that passes unanimously. I appreciate that very much. While we've got people here, I'm gonna bop back real quick to item number 4, consideration and possible action to approve the May 10th, 2023 regular meeting minutes of the Technical Advisory Committee. I assume everyone has had an opportunity to review them. Are there any questions or comments that need change for those minutes from the last meeting? Hearing none, I'm going to make a motion to approve those minutes. I need a second, please.
Second.
Too slow again, John. Sorry, man. You got a lag. You're gonna have to learn to deal with it. I have a motion and a second from member Reuter. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. John, you got an eye on that?
Aye.
Very good, thank you. That passes unanimously. I appreciate it. A little torn what to do on this call to the public thing. I think I'm going to read it out loud. We have on item number 3, call to the public. I did have a request for public input card. Mr. Gary Anderson of 845 Flying U Court, spokesperson for Yavapai Hills Sundog Committee. Gary wrote this, wishing to address the following issue in regards to the Sundog Connector project. Will this study include traffic safety review on expected impacts on the neighboring communities of Yavapai Hills and Diamond Valley to ensure improvements to their infrastructures are included in build cost estimates? And so that was a comment. And Lindsay, I'm going to make sure that you get this and can take it into consideration with our consultant, and then we can evaluate that request.
Absolutely.
So,
Thank you.
leaving it at that. Since I was on public call the public, sorry, I don't know if we have anybody else that is interested in addressing the Technical Advisory Committee as part of call to the public. It appears that most members of the public have dropped off, and I am not surprised because this is going so damn long. But I appreciate it. And if people come back and listen to the recording, at least they know that we can have addressed that section of the meeting. So with that, I'm closing the call to the public portion of the agenda. And we're going to move on to item number 13, which is review, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval to amend the fiscal year 22-23 Unified Planning Work Program and fiscal year 22 through 26 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, the MTIP. Vinny, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. In the spirit of the length of the meeting, we're going to be incredibly brief. You have all the amendments listed there. If you have any questions, we'll take them. The only two things that I would highlight for the purposes, Allison, go back to the first page, please. Is number 3 and number 4. That's the only thing I would highlight for your purpose. Number 3 is the on-ramp project I talked about earlier. We are reducing that project by 2.4 million because it read design only. So we are still looking for that $2.4 million from the state to put it back into the project. And then I would acknowledge item number 4 with the assistance of Mr. Dan Cherry, Mayor Hughes, and others. There was a great, and Heather attended a meeting with ADOT to identify this project and its needs. And thanks to that conversation, a whopping $6.5 million has been added through the state budget process for the roundabout, a future roundabout at 69-169. I believe that brings the balance of the project for a roundabout just under $12 million.
Yeah,
So could be the most expensive roundabout I've ever experienced, but so be it.
Now, so they've increased it by 6.5, but there was other funding that was already there for it.
1.5 from the state legislature and 3.5 from ADOT. So if I'm calculating quickly, someone that's, I think, a little over $11.5 million total.
All right, so we can fully expect that we have funding there to build that. However, the design comes out, but there will probably be funding left over at some point that perhaps we can work towards reallocating that depending on how things go in the future. So
Be wonderful.
Yeah.
I would put a note that the fire, CAFMA, Central Arizona Fire, met with me, and there is a desire for a traffic signal at the fire station. What is that? Less than a half a mile from that intersection.
on 169.
169. They are having challenges getting fire equipment out with the traffic, so that may be something that we explore to provide partnership and assistance in that.
Okay.
That's all I got. Questions or comments?
I'd like to comment that I appreciate that item number 7, the Williamson Valley Road and Stasinski Road HSIP project that we are working towards. We've done the project initiation on that, and I greatly appreciate that this is on here for the MTIP. So thank you for that. I presume the city feels similarly about their Gail Gardner Way. I think I saw something that was getting spaced out a little longer, perhaps, like maybe they had construction out like in 26 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, go ahead, Allison.
Those numbers so we can include that in this amendment for the Gail Gardner traffic signal.
Yes.
Ian is suggesting we modify the FY24 figure to 312,000 design, and then move 40,000 design to FY25, and then move 688,000 construction to FY26.
All right, very good. So any motion for recommending approval of this, we'll need to make note of those changes that were received from the city of Prescott. Are there any other thoughts or input on this before I entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, we should also note we will reflect the changes discussed during the item number 10 of 8 to reflect priorities A, B, and C.
Yes, very good. That sounds good. For the RTAC discussion, yes. Okay. All right, hearing no further discussion, I will make a motion to recommend, let me get some language here, motion to recommend to the executive board to approve amending the FY 22-23 Unified Work Planning Work Program and FY 22 through 26 CYMPO MTIP as presented and discussed here with changes in regards to the RTEC list recommendations and the changes to the Gail Gardner Fair Street signal as presented here. Johnny?
Seconded.
All right, very good. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. I appreciate that very much. We're on to item number 14.
No Mark, no Andrew, just Myrna.
Myrna, I'm going to skip over items A and B and jump right to C for federal state updates. You have the ADOT Multimodal Planning Division update. We have had some materials provided to us here, I believe, as part of your report. So the floor is yours.
Well, sir, if you don't mind, since they are in writing right in front of you, if you want me to read them, I'll be more than happy to. But to save time, I can not.
I don't want you to. Is there anything you in particular you feel is particularly important to draw attention to?
Not really, other than the 5-year program is going to be presented to the State Transportation Board for approval on May 16th. That's probably the biggest thing that we have going on. Yes.
All right. Well, I appreciate the update, and I encourage all members to review the information provided by Myrna. And with that, I am going to adjourn this meeting and hope that everybody has a lovely evening. And thank you all for being here for this rather long session. So thank you and have a good day.
You can now
Thank
have
you.
3 months off.